Hello, I am Rachel Edson, and I am sharing my education history report about Dr. Christine Ballengee-Morris. I was lucky enough to be able to interview Dr. Morris through a couple different phone calls and some email correspondence. She is a prolific art educator, author, professor, and researcher. And during our conversation, I was able to learn about her life, her childhood through retirement, and her reflective thoughts about her journey as an art educator. So, the main things about her that make her prolific, I would say, are her writings. She's a great author, she is a contributor and a fellow. You can see some of her articles in the National Art Education Association publication. It's called Art Ed. And she's known for arts integration, visual culture, community-based learning, and indigenous culture. And overall, I would say she is an agent of community change, specifically in her local community and also in the community of art educators that she's impacted. So let's get to know a little bit about the life and legacy of Dr. Christine Ballengee-Morris. She was born in 1955 in the Dayton area of Ohio, and she has roots in Appalachia, and she's a descendant of the Native American Cherokee tribe. Her life's work has been influenced by her geographic and cultural home. She hails from a family of women artists, crafters, and seamstresses that encouraged her to sit and learn from them. I'll actually go back here. Her aunts, mother, and grandmother would sit and talk while sewing. Young Christine would watch and learn as they taught her how to thread a needle, and she would listen as they worked and talked. She was given an old cigar box filled with quilting fabric scraps and scissors. They would help her as she created what they affectionately called purdies. And the women in her life also showed her how to make bread dough ornaments, encouraged her as she experimented with other mediums. She recounted a fond memory from her childhood when she experimented with crayon shavings. She explained that her aunt would let her do these experiments when she played with different art materials. She let her test out her theory that if you put crayon shavings in water and froze them, like in an ice cube tray, that you could take those ice cube crayons and draw with them and make multicolored crayons. Even in her failure, she was encouraged to try her experiments again. And she also kind of explained she felt like she was experimenting with encaustic experiments at the age of 7. She spent time in North Carolina as a child, digging for clay and creating pottery with her family using materials directly from the land. These early childhood memories made an impression on her. Her parents saw how she enjoyed art and gave her various kits to create candles, paint by numbers, and coloring books. Although she grew up making with so many different art experiences, she had no formal art education until she entered the 7th grade. Growing up with the freedom to experiment and play at home with her aunts, she was testing out her ideas of what she could and couldn't do. She felt that the prescriptive activities she was given when she entered formal art education were a challenge for her. She described one of those challenges regarding an architectural drafting project she had. The assignment was to use rulers first to draft and design a home and then construct it. So she chose to design a round house, and this was the first time she experienced critical feedback regarding her art. They basically told her there are no round houses. You need to design something different. So she came home visibly upset. Her mother comforted her and showed her a sketch that she had done in her own sketchbook of a variety of different round houses. So she left with this feeling of like being understood by her family, but she knew that when she was at school, she had to sort of follow their rules in order to succeed. So part of her Appalachian culture led her to dance, which became her first art passion. She's a flatfoot dancer, which is an Appalachian form of clogging or tap dancing that's done to folk music from the region. She was interested in pursuing art and dance, but was influenced by her parents and society at large to uh, pursue something different, something more profitable, maybe. And so she went in for her AA in mathematics. Being strong academically, that's what she decided to choose as her major was accounting, so she would be more employable. After graduating and working as an accountant, she married and relocated to Oxford, Ohio. Being that Miami University is near Oxford, she decided to re-enroll in school to get her MBA. She decided to find something that utilized her math degree but was closer a little bit to her passion for the arts. So she initially majored in arts management as her concentration for her MBA. But the first class that she chose required for the concentration was an art education class, which was taught by Dr. John Michael. He was an early art education influence on her, and at the same time, she was also taking a drawing class. So after those few college classes, she decided to fully commit to the idea of art education. She changed her major, and even though she was warned by her parents, she felt confident to do that. There was a realization and a turning point in her life where she realized that was it. She was going to pursue art. The arts were contagious, and she had felt like she finally found her calling. Another course required for her degree was art therapy, where she had her first teaching opportunity in a nursing home. So, experience as an undergrad assistant conducting art theory or therapy led her to her next education job as a preschool teacher and later as an art museum educator. She essentially became a art teacher or like a CART teacher, except she wasn't traveling from classroom to classroom. She was traveling like across the city to her different spots for her art education classes. When I asked who influenced her early educational philosophy, she explained her experience learning about John Dewey early on, and the experimental school had a big impact. She identifies with progressivism and its ideals. Like Dewey, she favors experience and activity in education. To quote Eflin, teaching and learning should be based upon the natural development of a child, grounded in real experiences, organically related to the social life of the community. She was also influenced by the idea that students should be able to have the freedom to explore and learn from their environment and local culture. The role of the teacher is facilitator and should not try to be prescriptive. And I think that was her experience she had when she was a young student artist that really influenced her. She values the concept that a student is a whole person and that not all learning is academic. After learning about Dewey and his contribution to education, she chose to take another class while enrolled at Miami University at an experimental school founded in Dewey's name and focused on teaching integrated curriculum. At this time, she was also volunteering at the school. She explained that it changed her perspective. She followed the notion that art could be her major instead of her minor and influenced her professional choices at that time. She started to explore what an integrated curriculum could look like in her art classroom. Around the same time, she divorced her husband, moved to Charleston, West Virginia, and got the first available position in education she could find as a behavior disorder teacher, where she did most of her learning on the job. She not only experienced how to treat behavior issues in the classroom, but also how to test the theories that she had been learning at Miami University, and that developed her early educational philosophy. Concluding the school year, she remarried and moved to North Carolina. Her relocation to North Carolina came at an interesting time because there was an arts education bill that had just been passed, which made arts mandatory at every grade level. She got a job as a cultural art teacher at the middle school level, which served 4th through 8th grades. She recounts this as her favorite time as an art educator and the best experience in her career as a teacher. She suddenly had other art educators and coworkers and colleagues to talk with and collaborate on other aspects of art education, like budgeting, how to ask for donations, how to get the community involved in the education of young people. She was able to provide an integrated curriculum, teaching music, theater, and visual arts, and showcasing it in community events and exhibitions. She involved the parents, community members, and local businesses at these events. And not only was she integrating curriculum, she was also coming from a community based art education approach. Her husband, musician, and songwriter David Morris convinced her to perform with him, dancing the Appalachian Flatfoot. And they became artists in residence, performing at concerts and schools. They introduced integrated curriculum, reading, writing, music and songs, and drawing while residing at schools for 1 week at a time. They were essentially traveling artist residence teachers. They integrated the arts curriculum based on the needs and concerns of the communities they were working in. Dr. Ballengee-Morris explained that at one site, the focus of the curriculum was environmental. The town they were teaching in had creeks dying because of local pollution effects, and they would teach the students how to incorporate those themes into the folk songs and visual arts, as well as the culminating performances at the site. So at this point, she decided to return to Miami University to get her master's degree in art education and continue her learning. She soon realized that the master's program was not going to be enough, and so she considered getting her PhD with the goal of becoming superintendent. Her art education chairperson, Brent Wilson, actually advocated for her and advised against it and encouraged her to pursue research instead. When writing her dissertation, she focused on one of the community arts projects that she had done with her husband at Mountain Cultural Arts of West Virginia. She examined how community issues reintroduced into the culture via an integrated curriculum affected mountain culture. This experience was one that made an impact on her and her philosophy. And in an article she wrote for Art Education, she says, "Our job as educators is to connect children to their culture, learning, thinking, and their world." She also mentioned another person that impacted her philosophy was her co-mentor, colleague, someone she looked up to, Patricia Stir. She read Stir's writing in art education, particularly her studies in integrated curriculum, in which she was very interested. She ended up writing to her, and to her surprise, Stir called her. They eventually formed a professional relationship where they happened to, and then there happened to be an opening at Ohio State University where Stir was employed. She was in the room for Christine's interview, and she ended up getting the position there. In Ballengee-Morris's own words, getting to work with Patricia Stir was a dream come true. Her interest in literacy, education, liberation pedagogy, and the work of Paulo Freire led her to opportunities in Brazil. She traveled there multiple times. One time she was able to interview him about his work in community-based art education. His teachings on interdisciplinary education through the arts had an impact on her philosophy. After meeting and speaking with him, she wrote an article about the experience. She describes how he inspired her and many other art educators and her takeaways from the experience. She concluded her article with the following quote: "Arts-centered programs that encourage critical thinking, cultural identity, cultural embracement, and multiple ways of expressing are the pathways towards literacy." Her philosophy of education remains to find joy in collaboration and reflection or brainstorming with her colleagues. As an educator, she's grown more into a person who works with and applies Indigenous ways of knowing and Indigenous research and pedagogy. She explained Indigenous ways of knowing as collaborating, forming relationships, and seeing the world as a whole. I found a quote from one of her writings with Stir in 2014. She said, "Connecting concepts that are a part of the holistic and cyclical views are wisdom, humility, respect, humor, sharing, integrity, strength, non-interference, and reciprocity. Native pedagogy is based on the spiral, never going back. It is about the process of the or a journey." So one can take their knowledge of the world apart, kind of move the pieces around and put them back together. Other Indigenous ways of knowing, like forming relationships around communication and storytelling with art, contribute to her more mature philosophy. She relates knowing to her experience as a child when she was creating her purdies from the contents of her cigar box. The freedom of sitting down and making and listening to stories while creating contains similar elements to her childhood art making experience. These experiences have formed her current philosophy. When asked about her educational legacy, she told a few stories from her recent retirement party in September of 2022. She heard her legacy told directly through the students and folks who came to celebrate her career. Her students, colleagues, and former faculty saw her as a mentor. Her best experiences in education were ones in which she mentored and also co-mentored and learned through her graduate-student relationships. For her, mentoring is a relationship that is symbiotic, change-making, and meaning-making. Her co-mentoring education approach came about after she established a field school class for arts administration and was assisting graduate students. She was able to help students find their path, and she encouraged her students to follow their passion, imagine their futures, and build the way to get their goals if the framework didn't exist already. She describes her trick as an educator as always intently listening. She listens to her students, she really hears them, and is able to explain it back to them in a way that helps them move forward. She believes listening is a tool for positive relationships to help students get to where they want to go on their own path. When asked how her philosophy differs from her peers, she expressed that it didn't vary much. Later in her career, she was fortunate to choose who she worked for and who she worked with to make sure her values aligned. Her pedagogy and philosophy were compatible with her colleagues, and she ended up working with a department that was mainly on the same page as her. Colleagues of hers worked and wrote together. She shared her professional career with people of the same ilk, and they mutually supported each other. She also shared that there was an increase in understanding the pedagogy in the context of our current time, since Black Lives Matter and other social justice movements have become more popular. Students have confided in her that they are constrained by certain requirements for their studies, but she encouraged them to create a new path for themselves, challenging her own peers in the art education research department, but satisfying the inquiry of her graduate students. So again, she's learning, listening to her graduate students and helping them pave their way forward. Her legacy is multidimensional. She's worn many hats, so to speak, inspired by many through her efforts as an art educator, justice seeker, researcher, and author. She not only touched the lives of her individual students, but founded the Multicultural Center on campus to address the needs of all students at Ohio State University. She pioneered intercultural education and addressed the intercultural needs of specific groups at Ohio State. She engaged her students in social justice, activism, and improved the intercultural development of the community as a whole. Her research and writings examine social justice as it relates to integrated curriculum, pedagogy, and student growth. She regards her educational legacy as one in which she taught and learned from her students as a co-mentor and takes pride in her accomplishments to push art education forward during her tenure. Dr. Christine Morris's legacy is evidenced by her published writings on arts integration, visual culture, community-based learning, and Indigenous culture education, but most importantly, her relationships and lasting impact on her students. Thank you for watching.